2023, Legislative Summit 2023, and the Senate Mashinani slated for later in the year. 3, an action-oriented joint communique spelling out commitments of the COG and Senate to enhance dialogue, address challenges, and accelerate service delivery. And lastly, comprehensive resolutions targeting social development and protection concerns with clear timelines to be implemented jointly by the Senate and the COG and monitored by respective technical teams. Honorable Senators, I therefore urge all the Senators to prioritize and attend this very important meeting. I thank you. Next order.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the majority leader, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the Senate this 8th June 2023. Number 1, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Makwiny County State and Public Officers Car and Mortgage Loan Fund for the year ended 30th June 2022. Number 2, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Machakos County Assembly, Housing and Car Loan Scheme Fund for the year ended 30th June 2022. Number 3, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the county governments of Nyamira County Revenue Fund for the year ended 30th June 2022. Number 4, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the county government of Nyamira receiver of revenue statements for the year ended 30th June 2022. I beg to lay.
Next order, Clerk.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Statement pursuant to Standing Order 53-1, the Honorable Senator Christo Asige.
A moment, Chair, Speaker. Thank you, Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare regarding enforcing the 5% employment quota for persons with disabilities in public sector recruitments. In the statement, the committee should confirm whether the national government, through its ministries, such as the Ministry of Defense, and state agencies, such as the Kenya Revenue Authority, which in recent adverts advertised for 1,500 and 245 job openings respectively, have complied with the legislative requirement to reserve 5% of the advertised positions for PWDs. Explain the mechanisms put in place by the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action to ensure that public sector entities such as KRA adhere to the 5% rule during recruitment processes, stating how this compliance is audited and enforced. Address the broader concern of the need of regular compliance checks on public sector recruitments so that the 5% quota for PWDs is consistently respected and applied, and state measures the ministry is taking to raise awareness and understanding of the 5% rule among potential employers in the public sector. I thank you.
Next, Senator George Mbugua.
I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Education regarding the status of funding for special needs schools across all counties. In the statement, the committee should, 1, confirm whether the government has increased the capitation to learners in special needs schools by 50% and ring-fenced the 15% of all public-funded bursaries to pupils with disability as it had undertaken in its bottom-up economic transformation plan of 2022-2027. 2, state steps to address staffing in Education Assessment and Resource Center, EARC, considering that special officers have retired and have not been replaced, particularly in Nairobi County, where only 3 EARC officers serve 17 sub-counties. And 3, address the discrepancy in infrastructure between regular and special needs primary and secondary school, stating the budgetary allocation for all special needs schools in the financial year 2023-2024. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What is your point of order, Senator Chirange?
Mr. Speaker, I rise under Standing Order number 1. Mr. Speaker, I request your indulgence. If you look at statement number 1 and number 2, it concerns our unique nature of our population, especially the PWDs. I request using your Standing Order number 1, at least like you did last time, maybe 1 senator or 2 senators both sides, so that the what Senator Crystal Lasike and what Senator Mbugua is raising, we can just quickly maybe unlimit our time to 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker. And my number 2, Mr. Speaker, I want to bring your attention, and I will request your ruling at the end of this statement hour. You are aware that some county assemblies, Mr. Speaker, sir, have gone on strike, the MCAs. And you remember we had a discussion. I was seeking your indulgence, understanding order number 1 again. If you can request the Committee on Devolution, maybe to give us progress report, maybe by next week through your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, because I'm informed that a number of county assemblies will keep shutting down in the last part of this week and next week, Mr. Speaker. Those are my just 2 interventions. Thank you for intelligence.
Thank you, Senator Chirange. I'm afraid I may not be able to allow comments on these statements because once when we sat as SBC, having looked at the order papers for the last 3 or 4 months, we realized that we were not making any progress beyond statements. So it's like this Senate's main mandate was basically to prosecute statements. And we were not prosecuting our main mandate, that is processing bills. And therefore, I deliberate, it may be painful, but it was necessary that we leave the committees to handle statements. Once a senator rises to request for a statement, to save time, we commit that particular statement to the select committee and then move to the next. Senator Chirange, if you look at the order paper today, you have a bill. And if you proceed in the manner you are suggesting, that bill may be with us for the next 4 months. And I don't think you would wish to have your bill hang around for 4 months. So it is with those reasons that I will not be able to invite comments on the statements. Senator, yes, Senator Wambo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a small one on the issue raised by Senator Chirange on the strikes in county assemblies. The Speaker, I do not want us to go back to where we came from. The Committee on Devolution does not need any ruling or direction from the Speaker to act on matters relating to their committee. In fact, I would expect that on their own motion next week, they should give us an update report on what is happening in our counties. They don't need any direction from the Speaker. I thank the Speaker.
This is a very weighty issue, the chair of devolution. And I believe you've had these sentiments from your colleagues. Indeed, I received that memorandum. And I think you are the door to these assemblies as far as the Senate is concerned. So by next week, possibly by next week, you should be able to be giving the Senate a progress report on how you're handling these matters. And if need be, then you can even invite, depending on the kind of progress you're making, we may either come up with different interventions or maybe allow you to proceed in the manner that you'll be allowing. But it's good to give the Senate some progress reports and the challenges you're facing, because the Senate as a plenary here is also here to help you succeed in the mandate of your committee. Just let the say something in this regard. You need to go on record. The reason we have these microphones is because we cannot be heard. Proceed. Okay. Proceed, Senator Bat.
No, Mr. I mean, Honorable Speaker, I think I've had the issue that we'll have a meeting from tomorrow with the CAF guys in Nakuru. So the process is still on. I think we'll be able to give you a report by next week, God willing.
So by next week, Wednesday, we expect a progress report.
We'll do that.
Thank you. Senator Edwin Sifuna. That statement is dropped. Senator Hamida Kibwana. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to read the statement on behalf of Senator Hamida on the lifting of the ban on logging in public, in public and community forests in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources regarding reports of the lifting of the ban on logging in public and community forests in Kenya by the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. In the statement, the committee should, 1, state whether the ban on logging in public and community forests has been lifted, stating the rationale behind the decision in view of the existing forest policy and legislative frameworks. 2, to table evidence of any environmental impact assessment that was conducted prior to this decision. 3, state whether whether public participation was conducted, tabling evidence of the same. And 4, state measures in place to ensure the sustainable management and preservation of forests given the imminent threat posed by commercial and illegal logging. Senator Hamida Kibwana. Thank you.
Senator Miraj.
Asante Bwana Spika. Nimesimama kwa mujibu wa kanuni ya kudumu ya 53(1) kuomba kauli kutoka kwa kamati ya kudumu ya leba na ustawi wa jamii kuhusu maslahi na ustawi wa mabaharia nchini Kenya. Katika taarifa hiyo, kamati iangazie yafuatayo. Ieleze ni hatua gani serikali inachukua kuhakikisha uzinduzi rasmi na utendakazi wa baraza la mishahara ya wafanyikazi wa baharini, ikizingatia kwamba mabaharia wanasalia kuwa kwenye kipato duni nchini Kenya. Pili, iarifu Seneti sababu zinazopelekea ucheleweshaji wa uchapishaji wa vitambulisho vya mabaharia, ikieleza kwa kina ni mipango gani serikali inafanya kuhakikisha zoezi hilo linatekelezwa kwa upesi ili kuwapa fursa mabaharia kuweza kuingia nchi mbalimbali ulimwenguni. Tatu, ipendekeze utekelezaji wa sera ya mgao wa mshahara wa mabaharia na kuwalazimisha wamiliki wa meli kutuma 60% ya mshahara kwenye akaunti za mabaharia hao nchini Kenya zikiwa katika sarafu ya dola. Na 4, kupendekeza kuajiriwa kwa wakaguzi wa wafanyikazi wa baharini mahususi wa kusaidia kufuatilia maslahi ya mabaharia wanapotoka safarini.
Thank you. Next order.
Order number 8, the Employment Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 11 of 2022, second reading.
Senator Chirange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I just want to reply, has been called out as mover to reply. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a straightforward bill, and I want to thank a lot of senators, Mr. Speaker, and the committee that gave invaluable advice and report on the Employment Amendment Bill 2022, and just say that I want to thank Senator Okiya Omtatah, who seconded the bill, among other senators. Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill, in conclusion, has generated a lot of misinformation and miscommunication. The right to disconnect will be guided by the law, Mr. Speaker, and I think many people have said that I'm pushing, and the Federation of Kenya Employers, Central Organization of Trade Union, among others, Mr. Speaker, have raised concern about this bill, Mr. Speaker. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, with post-COVID, during COVID pandemic, Mr. Speaker, we were able to learn, Mr. Speaker, a lot of working from home, remote working, using Skype, using Cisco, using other applications, Mr. Speaker, including Teams even in our judiciary, Mr. Speaker, where we were working from home and working virtually. So this bill is informed, Mr. Speaker, with what we experienced during COVID, where even the Senate was working virtually, and we were having an hybrid, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, right to disconnect is not right kupiga sherehe, as many young people would imagine, that on Fridays you are not supposed to be called by your employers, Mr. Speaker, or you are not supposed to be called beyond working hours. What I'm just saying in the right to disconnect is this bill has been implemented in most countries, Mr. Speaker. Kenya will be one of the, Mr. Speaker, countries in Africa, if this law is assented to by the President, to proceed with the right to disconnect, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this is very important, that the working environment We need to encourage and ensure, but we don't need to abuse, Mr. Speaker. I have indicated that some employers are mischievous, where they send emails beyond 4:30, 5, Mr. Speaker, at that opportune, Mr. Speaker, and therefore they send and demand that by 8, Mr. Speaker, that work should be ready, Mr. Speaker, sir. And not knowing that all of us here, both men and women, have other obligations between 6 p.m. in the evening up to 6 a.m. in the morning. And therefore, that right should be respected. Mr. Speaker, the right to privacy should be respected. Right to family time, Mr. Speaker, where people have quality time to spend with family. Mr. Speaker, family is a social basic unit. Mr. Speaker, you saw the old man with the art, the great president of the Republic of Uganda, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Mr. Speaker, and we wish him well as he recovers. He has addressed the nation, and he said he has tested positive for COVID. He signed the anti-gay law, Mr. Speaker, in Uganda. And therefore, we need to lead. We need to lead in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, and therefore encourage remote working, Mr. Speaker. The reason President Museveni, Mr. Speaker, was signed that into law is to protect the family unit. We must protect the family unit because it's a basic. Mr. Speaker, when you are in your house, you can imagine your spouse, you are expecting to be prepared with chicken soup, Mr. Speaker. You know, I neighbor people who love chicken, especially free range, not the broiler. I know there are people who eat other things in this town, like they want broiler or kienyeji. But when you are somewhere, Mr. Speaker, and your stew is being prepared by your spouse, you see the employee sending messages of email, SMSs of work. You know, even it distracts you with what the Lord ordained us to do. Because some employers even send at midnight, Mr. Speaker, when we should be proceeding with other serious matters as ordained by the Holy Book of Procreation. So, Mr. Speaker, number 3 is that this bill does not give right. I've said this bill gives right to engage at an opportune time. You need to agree. What I'm just transferring colleagues and members and friends and leaders and even our visitors is to create a structured engagement. You know now if you work virtually, no one will pay you for overtime. Now I'm bringing a law that will ensure if you work virtually beyond working hours, as stipulated by the Employment Act, you are supposed to be compensated. So I'm just enriching and ensuring that Article 41 on labor rights under the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, is sure. Mr. Speaker, you see the President under the Finance Bill of 2023, the reason we are even pushing the Housing Levy Fund, Mr. Speaker, and I saw some people making fun that I could not answer the question on housing deficit in the country, Mr. Speaker, and I've seen in TikTok and many other social media, is that we are aiming, Mr. Speaker, to ensure we protect the family. How beautiful. In 6.5 million Kenyans who live in slums, including the city of Nairobi. And it is good my brother, as a senator of Nairobi, is here, who is a staunch Catholic, that how beautiful and how nice when you walk to your house, Mr. Speaker, under affordable housing program, you work, you have instant shower, you have a nice house, Mr. Speaker. It is very important. That is why this finance bill, Mr. Speaker, will ensure the family basic unit is protected. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, we are working, and I want to say this. Mr. Speaker, there are many young people who might want to say that in some instances, Mr. Speaker, this right to disconnect. I know the journalists, but we are exempting, Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of the country and my colleagues, is we are exempting with the people who work in emergency services. The people who work on call, there is an arrangement that they normally do, Mr. Speaker. And if you are a doctor, you are a fireman, you work in emergency department, Mr. Speaker, the right to disconnect will be exempted from you, Mr. Speaker, because you are supposed to ensure that you agree with the employer. Mr. Speaker, I want to allay with the fears of Federation of Kenya Employers and other sector players, and even the employers, be it the government or anybody. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, last session, we had push and pull on the floor of the House about mental health bill. Mr. Speaker. And we had an issue where we're having a breakdown. I'm just in the next 3, 4, 5 minutes, I'm concluding. Mental, I don't know why the leader, the deputy minority leader is excited today, but just for the record, because my bill has been misunderstood. Last year, and Senator Wambua here, Senator Stewart Madzai, who is our leader, Senator Ledama Olekina, we were with the former Senator, Sylvia Kasanga, if my memory serves me right. And she was pushing the mental health bill. What is happening, Mr. Speaker? There are targets, performance, Mr. Speaker, by banks, by these other organizations. You find our employees have burnout and they're having mental breakdown and depression because of the performance targets. You imagine you have left office at 6 or 5, sorry, then your bosses call you up to midnight. What is the targets? What were the sales that were being done, Mr. Speaker? We are protecting the burnout. We are protecting the health and mental wellness of the employees, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to call upon my colleagues. And I want to ask the FKE and other employers. I don't think it makes sense, Mr. Speaker, to have, Mr. Speaker, an employee who is mentally depressed, who has burnout, the productivity will go low, Mr. Speaker. Even International Labour Organization under the European chapter has agreed with me on the right to disconnect, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this is an international issue. It's not a local issue. I want to bring to the attention of the House, Mr. Speaker, where we are saying right to disconnect is a very important right under the evolving. And my brother, Senator Stewart Madzai, who is our revered and respected senior leader and minority leader, is a former judge of Labour Court. And he knows, Mr. Speaker, that some of these disputes is because of mental depression, Mr. Speaker. You have seen police killing each other. I don't want the Kenyan police. I'm saying some elements in police killing because of mental breakdown, the stress, the burnout. And Senator Amida Kibwana had brought even a motion, Mr. Speaker, that we are still discussing on the floor of the House. Because of mental breakdown, burnout, because we are deranged, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, the 50th point that I wanted to make is these international organizations. France, other countries, Mr. Speaker, have done right to disconnect. Even in Portugal, Mr. Speaker. Let us respect, and I want to say this, Mr. Speaker, the environment is changing from the traditional office, where you go to your desk and work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Mr. Speaker. We now need to shift our focus to remote working environment. And I know that the correct person, and it will assist even people living with disabilities to be able to work at the convenience, because most of the government offices, Mr. Speaker, do not have friendly access or PWDs in the Republic. And therefore, this right, I know where Senator Ledama stayed for some time, Mr. Speaker, there is a debate in the US about this bill. I would have expected the US, where Senator Ledama stayed, and might have borrowed these political strategies from there, Mr. Speaker. And you remember, many people don't know that Senator Ledama at one point did want to run for presidency before. I don't know whether that dream is still there. But where he stayed in the US, Mr. Speaker, but I want to advise him to join us. He might have his dream realized in this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, but after you. So he should also make sure he behaves on the order, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chiranga, can you conclude your comments, please? So
I'm concluding, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you should even be adding me time, because I'm putting you on a proper trajectory of your future or national power. So, Mr. Speaker, that is what I was saying, that there are many countries of serious economies, largest economies, are buying this idea of right to disconnect. Colleagues and friends, this bill will be a life changer. This bill will transform. This bill will protect our right to family. This bill will ensure everybody, Mr. Speaker, is respected. This bill will ensure the growth and respect of the huge labor rights across the country. This bill of right to disconnect does not mean kupiga sherehe to avoid working, but you must show the performance. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, is to ensure, Mr. Speaker, when you engage through the email, through the SMS, through any virtual engagement in the remote working environment virtually, your employer must compensate you the same as overtime when you sit beyond working hours in an office, Mr. Speaker. And I hope the National Assembly will agree with me and allow this bill to be signed by His Excellency the President, Dr. William Ruto, and therefore effectively amending the Employment Act and giving Kenyans an opportunity. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I want to thank your office has been of help, the Secretariat led by the clerk, the Committee of Labor and Social Welfare. I've seen the Vice Chair, Senator Mbugwa, and a number of chairs. Mr. Speaker, they have been supportive. Your office has been very supportive and vital in, and many other people who they have given, the Kenyans who either have given virtually or in physical, that they support, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as I reply, I request that under the standing orders, 66, if I'm correct. Standing order? 66. I thought, Mr. Speaker, he wanted to, anyway, I don't want to say. It's under standing order 66, Mr. Speaker. I request that the putting of the question for division be deferred until appropriately guided by the House. With those opening remarks, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to reply.
Thank you. Division on that bill is deferred until otherwise advised. Now, Honorable Senators, at this juncture, I will move to rearrange the sequence of the order paper pursuant to Standing Order 45-2. Now, if you go through your order paper, you see the order number 10, the County Allocation of Revenue Bill. This is a bill that has some statutory period within which to be processed and finally concluded, and therefore we will start with that order. Thereafter, I will give further guidance on how we're going to move after we are done with that. Clerk, kindly proceed to call that order. Before the clerk reads that order, allow me to make this communication. Honorable Senators, in the public gallery, we have 72 students accompanied by 3 teachers from Muka Girls High School in Makwiny County who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow Senator Wambua just 1 minute to say a word of welcome.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to join you in welcoming students from Muka in Makwiny. Their senator is engaged elsewhere, but is on his way to the chamber. For the visiting students and teachers, I say welcome to the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. This is where your leaders elected to represent different counties in this country converge every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to debate matters of national concern, and especially matters that touch on counties. I wish you a fruitful stay, and wish that in the course of your stay, you will learn a lot, and some of you will aspire to come back here, not as visitors in the public gallery, but as senators representing different parts of the country. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I say welcome to the students.
Call the next order, clerk.
Order number 10, the County Allocation of Revenue Bill, Senate Bills number 16 of 2023, second reading.
The Chairperson, Standing Committee on Finance and Budget.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you very much for the opportunity to present on the second reading of County Allocation of Revenue Bill 2023. Mr. Speaker, the County Allocation of Revenue Bill 2023, Senate Bill number 16 of 2023, was published on the 27th of April 2023 and read in this House for the first time in the sitting held on the 2nd of May 2023. The bill was introduced, the bill was then assigned to Senate Finance Committee, the Committee of Senate Standing Committee of Finance and Budget for further processing. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill proposes to share the allocation of 385 billion, .425 as contained in Division of Revenue Act 2023 equitably among the county governments in the financial year 2023-2024 in accordance with the third basis of revenue sharing. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill also contains two schedules. The first schedule is that of the horizontal share of revenue of 385.425, and the second schedule, which is that contains the ceilings for the executive and the county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, sir, the horizontal distribution of equitable share among the 47 county governments is achieved using the third basis for revenue sharing formula as approved by the Senate in September 2020. Mr. Speaker, for the sake of just refreshing and sharing, that formula proposes now, if applied to the 385.25, the third basis provides 158.25 billion to be shared using an allocation ratio applied in the financial year 2019-2020, the balance, which is the case of 226.75, to be allocated such that basic equal share takes 20%, population index takes 18%, land area index takes 8%, agriculture index takes 10%, health index takes 17%, and road access index 8%, urban index 5%, and poverty at 14%. Mr. Speaker, sir, regarding the recurrent expenditure ceiling, the Commission on Revenue Allocation submitted the recommendations as they have processed for county assemblies and county executive. These are considered by the committee and published with few amendments. The total county assembly recurrent budget ceiling for financial year 2023-2024 amounts to 39.597 billion approximately. This is about 14.5% increase as compared to allocation of financial year 2022-2023 due to the provisions for MCA car reimbursement. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the other hand, the county executive budget ceiling for financial year 2023-2024 amounts to 25.825, 556.395, representing an allocation of 9.34% reduction from the allocation of 2022-2023 budget ceilings. Mr. Speaker, during the consideration of County Allocation of Revenue Bill 2023, the committee held consultative meeting with various stakeholders, and among them is the National Treasury and Economic Planning, the Council of Governors, the Commission of Revenue Allocation, the County Assemblies Forum, as well as the Society of Clerks at the table, SOCAT Kenya. Mr. Speaker, a number of county assemblies appeared before the committee and requested upward adjustment of the recurrent expenditure ceiling for the county assemblies. The committee noted the issues raised, such as security in some counties, cost of public participation in other counties, and acquisition of recurrent assets, which are one-off expenditures for some of these county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, sir, having considered the bill, the committee recommends the Senate to approve the bill with amendment that second schedule of the bill be deleted and substituted thereof with the new second schedule reflecting the adjusted recurrent expenditure ceilings for the county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's worthwhile to note that there is some air of emergency around the passage of this bill because the county assemblies are required to pass their budgets by 30th of June 2023. And for them to pass that budget, then these numbers need to have been considered into the budget well in time for that deadline to be arrived at. Mr. Speaker, sir,
Senator Newton, you're out of order and you get a caution for the day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is the considered opinion and request of this committee that we expeditiously pass this county allocation of revenue bill in order to facilitate for the county assemblies to be able to factor in all the numbers as accurately as possible to minimize future necessity for amendment, and as well to make sure that we pass the bill in time for that consideration to take shape to meet the deadline of passage of county budgets by 30th of June. The committee has also made several recommendations which are contained in the detailed report as submitted. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to submit and request Honorable Senator Faki to second. Thank you.
Senator Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuunga mkono mswada wa ugavi wa rasilimali kwa kaunti zetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, mgao wa rasilimali za kaunti mwaka 2023 ni sheria muhimu ambayo inagawanya fedha kutoka kwa zinazotoka kwa serikali kuu kuja kwa serikali za kaunti. Mheshimiwa Spika, ieleweke kwamba bunge hili lilipitisha mswada wa DORA, yani Division of Revenue Act, ambayo ilileta bilioni 385.42 kutoka kwa serikali kuu kuja kwa serikali za kaunti. Mheshimiwa Spika, japokuwa sheria hii ilipita shingo upande, lakini ndio sheria ambayo iko kwa sasa, na kwa hivyo sheria hii ambayo tunaijadili imeundwa ikizingatia kwamba pesa zitakazotoka katika serikali kuu kuja kwa serikali za kaunti ni bilioni 385.425. Mheshimiwa Spika, ugavi wa rasilimali hizi umezingatia ile formula ya 3 ya kugawanya rasilimali ambayo ilipitishwa na bunge hili mnamo mwezi wa Septemba mwaka 2020. Kwa hivyo katika vipengele ambavyo vimejadiliwa, kwanza ni ile inaitwa mgao wa msingi, yani basic share, ambayo inachukua 20%. Halafu ukubwa ama wingi wa watu inachukua 18%, ukubwa wa ardhi 8%, ukulima 10%, afya 17%, barabara 8%, ukuaji wa miji 5%, na umaskini 14%. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika kujadili mswada huu, kamati yetu pia ilipata fursa ya kuchukua maoni kutoka kwa Council of Governors, baraza la magavana, wizara ya fedha, tume ya ugawaji wa rasilimali, Commission for Revenue Allocation, na washikadau wengine. Mheshimiwa Spika, vile vile kamati ilipata maombi kutoka karibu kaunti 17 ambazo zote zilitaka ziongezewe, mabaraza ya kaunti walitaka waongezewe pesa ambazo wamepewa kama pesa zao za msingi kwa mwaka 2023-2024. Mheshimiwa Spika, baadhi ya mambo ambayo yaliyazungumzia county assembly hizi ni pamoja na masuala ya usalama katika kaunti za mbali kama vile Mandera, ambapo inachukua gharama kubwa kuweza kupeleka usalama wakati wanafanya ile inaitwa public participation ama uhusishaji wa watu katika kujadili miswada yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, pia masuala ya assembly mpya kujengwa na vile vile pia kupata vifaa vya kisasa kama vile Hansard imekuwa ni donda sugu katika zile kaunti ambazo zimejenga assembly mpya. Na vile vile Mheshimiwa Spika, kuna ofisi pia za wabunge wa county assembly ambao kaunti zao hazina ofisi zile na zinapaswa kupata huduma kama vile furniture na mambo mengineyo. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tuliweza kuangalia mambo hayo na vile vile tukatoa recommendation mapendekezo kwamba hizo fedha ambazo walikuwa wanagawiwa ziweze kuongezwa ili kuhakikisha kwamba huduma zinapatikana sawa sawa katika kaunti zile. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona pia kwamba CRA, tume ya ugawaji wa rasilimali, imetoa mwongozo wa wafanyikazi wangapi wanaweza kuajiriwa na mabunge ya kaunti. Mheshimiwa Spika, imefikia wakati sasa kwamba ipo haja ya kuweza kuangalia upya masuala haya ya wafanyikazi wanaokwenda kwenye kaunti, kwa sababu Mheshimiwa Spika, kaunti zetu zimeweza kukua, kamati zimeweza kuongezeka katika kaunti zetu Mheshimiwa Spika, na kamati zile Mheshimiwa Spika zinasaidia ili kuhakikisha kwamba fedha zinazotumwa katika kaunti zile zinatumika kwa njia ya kisawasawa. Mheshimiwa Spika, ikiwa mabunge ya kaunti yatakuwa na unyonge wa kuweza kuangalia ama kufanya ile tunaita fast oversight, matatizo mengi yatakuja katika bunge la Senate ambayo yangeweza kutatuliwa katika kaunti zile ili kuhakikisha kwamba kuna haki na usawa katika ugawaji wa rasilimali hizo. Mheshimiwa Spika, pia tumeona kwamba mabunge ya kaunti bado yanazidi kudidimizwa ama kugandamizwa na serikali za kaunti kwa sababu ya fedha ambazo zinapitia kwa county treasury ili ndio ziweze kufika kwa mabunge ama wabunge wa kaunti Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo hili ni swala pia ambalo litahitajia kuangaliwa upya kwa sheria ya Public Finance Management Act ili county assembly zetu na county executive katika kaunti zetu ziweze kuwa na fedha zao tofauti ili kuhakikisha kwamba kazi ya county assembly hazilemai kwa sababu ya ukosefu wa fedha. Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu ni muhimu sana katika kuendesha kaunti zetu, na kama alivyotangulia kusema mwenyekiti wa kamati yetu ni kwamba ni lazima upitishwe kabla ya mwisho wa mwezi huu ili bunge za kaunti zinapokaa kujadili bajeti za kaunti ziweze kuzingatia zile pesa ambazo zitakuja kutoka kwa serikali kuu kwenda katika kaunti zetu na waziweze kuzijumuisha katika zile fedha ambazo wataokota katika maeneo yao ili kuhakikisha kwamba huduma zilemei. Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati tunajadili msaada huu, ripoti zilizoko ni kwamba zaidi ya county assembly 14 zimeweza kufunga kazi kwa sababu ya ukosefu wa fedha. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, ni muhimu kwamba serikali zingatie ile inaitwa disbursement schedule ambayo inapitishwa na bunge hili wakati wakati wanapotuma pesa kwa kaunti zetu, kwa sababu bila hivyo huduma zitalemaa katika kaunti zetu na ile ndoto ya kupata ugatuzi na kuhakikisha kwamba kila mwananchi anapata huduma kutoka kwa kaunti zetu itakuwa imefifia. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hayo mengi naunga mkono na mswada huu. Asante.
Honorable Senators, before I propose the question, I have this communication to make. Senator Mazayo. Honorable Senators, in the public gallery, we have 50 pupils accompanied by 5 teachers from Sekenani Primary School in Narok County, who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate, on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. Now, since these are young people, I will allow the most youthful senator to say a brief Very brief remark. Senator Oburu, please. Obura.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to welcome these young people to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I think it is an honor for us that these young people choose the Senate to come and learn something about legislation and about the leadership of this country. Mr. Speaker, it is very, very advisable that when young people come here, we give them words of encouragement. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage these young people to adopt the principles of hard work and also adopt the principles of discipline. Mr. Speaker, discipline is one of the cardinal principles of success in the life of young people. Mr. Speaker, if you are not disciplined and you don't obey your teachers, you don't obey your parents, and you get into the bad habits which is now affecting most of our schools, particularly young people, are getting engaged in drugs and in bad habits which spoil their futures. I want to tell them that all those things which like enjoyments and so on are still ahead and they will enjoy as much as they want. But this is not the time for them to enjoy. This is the time for them to work hard, obey their teachers, and also obey the principles of hard work, and also obey the parents, because your parents are working very hard at a time, Mr. Speaker, when the economy of this country is going through a lot of hardship, Mr. Speaker, and they must know that the burdens which are being borne by their parents to bring them here to pay for their school fees is all through a lot of sacrifice, not because in future they will help their parents, Mr. Speaker, but because their parents expect them to be independent and to support their own future lives. So it is upon them to work hard, and I really welcome them and appreciate that they have chosen to come and be with us here in the Senate and see how their leaders are speaking and giving some very, very good leadership guidance to the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for the opportunity.
Senator Ledama, you have under 1 minute to make your welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of myself and also of this House, I want to welcome the students from Sekenani Primary School. Mr. Speaker, Sekenani is in the greater Masai Mara region, where Narok County, and it's actually very interesting that today we are talking about the Kara. Narok County generates most of its own source revenue from the greater Masai Mara. But one of the challenges that we face in that area is that most schools are still lagging behind. In fact, I'm actually very happy that these students are here today. And I was just having a conversation with two of my colleagues, Senator, the chair of budget, and that we talked about visiting the school, and I'm happy that they have committed to be able to accompany me to go to the school in Masai Mara so that we can be able to go and build a dormitory for the young girls. So this is something which is highly commendable. Senator Kamar has also indicated clearly her support towards education. She's only asked me to tell the students that you have an opportunity to be able to become great leaders. You have been honored by this House, and particularly to be given an opportunity to be welcomed by the most youthful senator that we have in this republic. You can see that he is a attestation of hard work and being determined that even them can be able to come here. So I welcome them, and of course, after this, I will be joining them so that we can enjoy some lunch together, and at least they got a chance to see what is happening in this Senate. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question. that the County Allocation of Revenue Bill, Senate Bills number 16 of 2023, be now read a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance and opportunity to make my contribution to a very important bill to the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after we do the horizontal distribution of resources, Mr. Speaker, like we did a few weeks ago, and I listened to the comments of both the mover and the seconder of this bill on the debate that we had before this House, and the many others that we've had, including in public barazas, funerals, rallies, you know. Mr. Speaker, that is testament to the work of Senate and how important it is, particularly this bill, division of revenue, and eventually, once we have shared it between the national and the county governments, Mr. Speaker, to now share it amongst the 47 devolved units, Mr. Speaker, via the county allocation of revenue bill. And therefore, I want to congratulate the members of the Budget and Finance Committee who have taken time, worked diligently, and have now presented before the House a report, Mr. Speaker, a report which I will refer to most of the time in the submissions that I'm making before the House on what I think about this bill, Mr. Speaker, and the findings that have been made by this committee. Mr. Speaker, I have said times without number that I value and respect the work of every committee of this House. But unfortunately, because of having served longest in my own career in this House, in Budget and Finance Committee, I take a lot of interest in the work that they do. I follow it with keen interest. That's why when Senator Roba was moving this bill, I was out of the House when he began, I quickly dashed in to listen to him, to grab a copy of the report, and acquaint myself with what are the thoughts of the new colleagues. What do they think about county allocation of revenue, perhaps from a different eye. In fact, this is the first opportunity, Mr. Speaker, I get to read and see Kara, not as a member of a committee, but just an ordinary senator, and want to see it from the perspective of our colleagues who have taken time, listened to the presentation, the request that comes from the various county assemblies, Mr. Speaker, which is quite important. This is not a practice that was long established. It's something that we began a few years ago. Otherwise, back in the day, Mr. Speaker, once division of revenue was out of the way, there was very little interest on Kara, actually, Mr. Speaker. But with the introduction of ceilings, after we did the amendment to PFM, must have been 2019 or 2020, Mr. Speaker, and empowered our committee to be able to vary the various ceilings for individual county assemblies via the kind of request that both Senator Faki and Senator Roba were referring to, Mr. Speaker, then people took interest in this particular bill. And I want to congratulate our colleagues who have taken time. I will then quickly move on to, Mr. Speaker, the crux of the matter. 385.425 billion is the amount of money before the Senate, Mr. Speaker. And we are being asked to share this equitably amongst the 47 counties. Not equally, but equitably. A word, Mr. Speaker, that will take time for many to understand and distinguish. But that is what separates us and the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, that on many occasions, on matters such as CDF and the rest, but Senate, through its committees and what they've been able to do over the years, is able to set out a formula, Mr. Speaker, where we can equitably distribute these resources between all our 47 county units, taking into consideration the various dynamics and the difficulties. Mr. Speaker, you know that this country almost split right into the middle. And you know that debate is still alive between one man, one vote. It is actually Senate that added the 1 kilometer. Because we said, Mr. Speaker, that every inch of this country matters to us, Mr. Speaker. And we said, while it is possible to carry on the dreams and the aspirations of those that come from densely populated counties, Mr. Speaker, like yours truly, we cannot forget or leave behind those that comes also from sparsely yet very expansive counties, Mr. Speaker, that we were able to point to the country, Mr. Speaker, at that particular time, that every inch of this country is important. That though you may feel at this moment in time that for one reason or the other, that particular part of the country is not important to you, eventually you will come to understand that there is a correlation between a thriving Mandera and a thriving Kericho, Mr. Speaker, the county that I represent in this house. That there are things which, if they were to go wrong in Marsabit, Samburu, or any of these other far-flung counties, Mr. Speaker, have a direct correlation on us as the people of Kericho, Kisumu, whichever part of the country that you come, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this bill, Mr. Speaker, is an application, actually, of that particular formula. And if you read through the report, Mr. Speaker, the 385.452 is spread out via the table and schedule that has been issued together with the bill. Actually, after the work is done, Mr. Speaker, then what remains is pretty much a plug-and-play exercise. Because the minute you've determined the how, the bigger question then is how much, Mr. Speaker. And once those two are determined, then the other part that our colleagues in Budget and Finance Committee had to consider is the various ceilings. And I like, Mr. Speaker, to just point out that while reading through the bill, Mr. Speaker, I read through the report, and of keen interest to me, Mr. Speaker, are the various observations that have been proposed before eventually gathering the conclusion of the committee via the recommendation. Mr. Speaker, the committee informs us that they have taken concern, serious concern with the approach of CRA, Commission for Revenue Allocation, Mr. Speaker, on the approach of allocation for public participation component under the operations and maintenance expenditure. It doesn't fully take into account the unique needs of each county. Several counties have requested for an increase in allocation due to the cost associated with the vastness of these various counties, Mr. Speaker. And it's fairly straightforward to us that while you may want to distribute it equally amongst us, Mr. Speaker, you know that for a fact that many of us that come, say, from the western side of the country, our counties are densely populated but do not have the geographical expanse, Mr. Speaker, to carry out a public participation, for example, in my county, wouldn't be the same amount, Mr. Speaker, of what it will take to do the same in Turkana, Garissa, even Kitui, Mr. Speaker, which we visited 3 years ago. I didn't know, Mr. Speaker, how expansive Kitui was until we did Senate Mashinani. It was the first time that we got to travel around. And there were days that you leave for committee engagements, Mr. Speaker, and you leave at 6 in the morning because you're supposed to make it to a meeting at 10. 3 hours and you're traveling within the same county, Mr. Speaker. I don't know how it will be like in Turkana, because Turkana is almost 2-3 times the size of Kitui. And basically that's what the committee and are saying and observing in the agreement with CRA. We shall continue to have this conversation because that is the work and that is the raison d'etre for this House, Mr. Speaker. That's why we exist as a Senate, to look into the uniqueness of each of our devolved units and try to carry them on board as we make decisions, as we consider. Of course, Mr. Speaker, the committee has told us as well that they note with great concern that counties continue to incur high costs associated with provision of legal services such as litigation, thereby further straining the resources available for development, Mr. Speaker. This is something that, Senator Roba, you will realize that human behavior is not static. It changes with time. And you know, the kind of work that we do is almost like a policing exercise as senators. The kind of audit issues that this House used to deal with, and I say this, Mr. Speaker, as somebody who has been in this House for quite a while, the audit queries that we used to deal with here, 2013 to 2017, are not the same with what I see nowadays, Mr. Speaker. You know, it reminds me of what Chinua Achebe says in his book, that when that Enugu, I think it was Enugu the bird, I forget the exact name of the bird, Mr. Speaker, that when men learned how to shoot without missing, then that particular bird also had to learn to fly without patching.
Majority
Mr. Speaker.
Leader, the name of the bird is Eneke.
Eneke, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for reminding me. Eneke is the name of a bird. And that's, Senate must become like Eneke as well. We must learn that as various intrigues continue to be witnessed in our county assemblies, we cannot come with the same mentality of 2013 to 2017. Previously, you'd hear misappropriation tenders that are being fixed here and there, but because of the vigilance of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, you see a lot of corruption in our county governments via this particular item that is being flagged by the Committee of Budget and Finance, Mr. Speaker, that you find a particular county an allocation of maybe 6 billion shillings, yet dedicating in excess of 500 million to legal services. What is this that counties are paying for, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we must stand out and we must stand up, Mr. Speaker, against this and find ways. Either you put a cap, like we have done on all these other things, including, Mr. Speaker, the budget to the various county assemblies, that you know that as a county, if this is your allocation, then you cannot be spending more than a particular amount, 1%, 1.5, 0.5 on legal services, Mr. Speaker. I say that because I know what goes on in our counties. And I agree with our Budget and Finance Committee, Mr. Speaker, when they flag out and say, this is an avenue for corruption. Many of these legal services that are being paid for do not even cost that particular amount, Mr. Speaker. And it's unfortunate that as Senate, we have continued to condone this kind of behavior, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it is my proposal, Senator Roba. Remember, one of the practice we have already established in this House in this particular term is that apart from just flagging out malpractices and maladies that are in our county, we must equally propose legislative mechanism of addressing those challenges. Therefore, I expect you as Budget and Finance Committee to be proposing and leading this House later with an amendment to the PFM on how this particular item is to be handled and dealt with, Mr. Speaker. If you go through all these counties, all of them actually have an office of the office attorney. I think we passed the office attorney bill either this term or late last term, Mr. Speaker. Yet, they are the same lawyers, they went to the same, they were taught by the same professors, yet for one reason or the other, you feel that you stand a better chance when you take your case to be handled by a lawyer outside of those that you have employed within the county government. Then you'd rather strike out those legal units so that you use whatever you pay for salaries to be what you can share with these various law firms that are being proposed and handling these legal cases, Mr. Speaker. Of course, there are counties, Mr. Speaker, that have continued to submit requests for additional staffing to various departments. The committee notes that the Senate resolved in May 2021, I recall this very well, Mr. Speaker, that county assemblies should rationalize their staff to the CRA staff capping of 100 by June 2023. To this extent, the committee cannot allow for additional recruitment of staff to a level exceeding 100. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the biggest failings of this House. And I say this fully conscious as a leader, knowing that we have failed and let down our people. It's not just about county assembly, Senator Roba. There is no county today, you know that under PFM regulations, no county is allowed to spend over and above 30% on recurrent expenditure. Actually 35, sorry. But as we speak today, there is not a single county that spends less than 35% on it. All of them are 45, 40, and we continue to condone this behavior. That's a failure on our part as Senate. We need to be moved, Senator Roba. And I challenge you and your committee, bring a motion to this House so that we come up with a recommendation so that before counties begin to receive the approvals to withdraw these monies that we are devolving in the next financial year, let each county governor file a redundancy plan or at least an action plan pointing out to measures that they are taking to ensure that they comply with that particular provision, Mr. Speaker. Because you know what has happened in our counties. A new county governor comes into office, what do? They hire a complete set of arrangement of staff, and you know what most of these staffers are do? One is carrying water for the governor, the other one is carrying a diary, there's another one carrying a biro pen, there's a famous one who has been around since 2013 carrying a chair. Mr. Speaker, how can we allow that? And you're proudly taking salaries as senators, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Senator Roba, we will go down in history as having failed devolution if we allow this practice to continue. I will tell you for a fact, and you know this because you have been a county governor, that the first set of governor like yours, like yourself, our Speaker, and many others, keenly observed this provision of the law and kept it below even 30% for many of these counties. But subsequent county governments, especially the counties that have had the unfortunate incident, I call it unfortunate because it's actually an unfortunate incident of having more than 2 governors at this particular time. That's counties where a governor lost in 2013 and therefore another one came, and perhaps even in 2017 a new one also came, because that's where this problem begins. As a Senate, we must address ourselves to this particular issue. And pointing out to county assemblies on this provision is not enough. We must be able to tell our governors to stop misleading the country, because the famous or the infamous argument before this House over the years has been that, you know, we picked staffers from the defunct municipal counties, and I agree. I agree with quite a number of them when they say that. But you know for a fact that many of those staffers, a good number have already retired, yet while they retire, they actually open up, because if you look at the amount, Mr. Speaker, that used to be earned by staffers of the defunct municipalities, is almost double or triple what the ordinary staffers earn presently. People are being hired for 30, 40, 50,000. But if you check the drivers that used to be hired at that particular time, because there were smaller units and you understand the tools of governance weren't as strong as they exist presently, Mr. Speaker, then you'll find that somebody cheekily looks at it and says, driver so-and-so has retired. Their salary used to be 120,000. So what do? Instead of filling up that position with one driver, you pick now 6 of them and pay them 20,000 each, because you're trying to think and imagine that after all, I have all these supporters that I promise that I'm going to give them employment. Employment, Mr. Speaker, can equally be an impediment to development, because if you take money that was meant to benefit an entire village through a road, through medicine to their dispensaries, Mr. Speaker, an ECD class, and use the same to hire 4 or 5 people only from that particular village. Have you developed that particular village, Mr. Speaker? You have denied the people of an entire village development opportunities, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to request members of Budget and Finance Committee, Senator Faki, you are a lawyer and you know this is possible. Please lead this House in calling our counties to order. Let each and every county governor, that's your work as a governor, that's why you are CEO. It doesn't matter where you found that county to be in. File a plan with the Senate and say, County X. And you know, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we haven't been as diligent as possible as senators. You need to know that as Senator for Siaya, as Senator for Kitui, what percentage of my budget is going to development, what percentage is going to recurrent. Once you know that, expect of your governor to file in this House a plan so that you know that by 2027, Mr. Speaker, we have forced our counties to spend in excess of 65% in development activities, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, what will have happened, we will have simply turned our county governors into paymaster generals. There are county governments, Mr. Speaker, that are spending 50-50. 50% on recurrent, 50% on development. That, or even more, actually, I'm informed, Mr. Speaker. That's really unfortunate. We are failing as Senate. I expect us that the committee will be able to lead us into that decision, Mr. Speaker. So what are the eventual recommendations, Mr. Speaker, of the committee? I see a deletion of the second schedule of the bill, setting out recurrent expenditure ceilings for the various county assemblies and county executive, and substituted with a new one. Of course, I want to believe this is in reaction to the request that came to you. And there is good justification. In fact, as Senate, you know, county assemblies are our brothers and sisters. Or they are our actually twin institutions. Without proper county assemblies, you cannot have successful implementation of devolution. You know the question that was brought here by Senator Cherargei yesterday, and we all made our contributions about what is happening in our county assemblies thanks to what SRC has done. Listening in on the good ideas that were being shared by colleague senators yesterday, and there are people, I think it was Senator Ojenda, who pointed out to us, and we all agree with him, that paying our members of county assembly well alone is not enough to empower that institution of our county assembly, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps it's a time that Senate also led in this conversation in ensuring that what is it that we expect of each of our 47 county assemblies, and what will be the costing to ensure that members of our county assembly are able to do or carry out their oversight responsibility without having to incur personal expenditure. That when they go to inspect projects, what tools are we providing to these county assemblies in terms of personnel and the knowledge and skills that they need to check? Many a times, Mr. Speaker, if you expect an MCA, even you as a senator, to just with your ordinary eye, read through the bill of quantities and look at a bridge and expect to say, oh, I think this is in compliance with what the State Department expected of a road or a bridge, Mr. Speaker, is expecting too much. You need professionals to do this job. And we can actually capacitate our county assemblies by ensuring that these people exist and there is a way and mechanism of checking. Otherwise, if you expect, it's like an internal audit department of any organization, Mr. Speaker. You expect them to read and go through all these proposals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know there are quite a number of my colleagues who want to make a contribution. This is a very important bill. I'll just say my last point, that there is a proposal also, Mr. Speaker, that actually within 90 days of the tabling of this report, county assemblies need to submit to CRA. And that, Senator, why CRA alone and not to Senate as well? They need to file with this House as well, because we check on the operations of all the county government, which includes the county assemblies. Let them file, if it was possible, and this is something that you can amend later on when you meet as a committee. As they file with, with CRA, perhaps a copy needs to be filed with this House, so that we see how many are not in compliance with this regulation that this House, resolution rather, that this House passed in 2021 on the number of members in each of the respective committee, county assemblies, the purposes of monitoring compliance with guidelines on committee composition, Mr. Speaker. Senator Ojenda mentioned to us yesterday that in his county assembly, you find a particular one member serving in 15 committees. You'd have to be a magician to be effective if you're serving in more than... Mr. Speaker, for those that have been here long enough, you know that the truth of the matter is that as a member of parliament, a member of county assembly, you can't be effective properly beyond 2 to 3 committees. That's a reality because of the demands of time and the many other things that you have to do as a member of parliament or a member of our county assembly. And that is what we are expecting of our county assemblies, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the same can be concluded. So, good job, Senator Roba. That's a proposal that we give to you as members of Senate. Of course, I see you have also gone further and tackled a very divisive issue that has been in this Senate for quite a long time. County-specific requests. You know, I see a habit, and I say this with a lot of tremendous respect to my colleagues on the minority and majority side, a habit that is creeping into this Senate that wasn't there before, where before voting on a bill, one way or the other, people say, what is in it specifically for my people? While it's your primary responsibility, that alone cannot be your basis for vote on a particular matter, because in almost all matters that come before this Senate, Mr. Speaker, there will always be gainers on a particular front and losers in a particular front. If you make it your business to just look out for your own particular county, what about the day others will also say, on this one, we are not voting with you because your county is benefiting? And the truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that there is no particular time where on your own you'll be able to raise or marshal the 24 delegations. You'll always rely on the collective spirit of all the 47 delegations that are in this House, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, people like Senator Wambua and the rest that have served in Senate long enough will tell you that many of these divisions are quite blood within a very short time in Senate. These ones of majority and minority. Before then, people caucus on need basis, and there are many things that happen in between. And therefore, I want to encourage colleagues that when a bill such as this comes before the House, it's not just enough to say, oh, because I say that because I know that they have dealt with county-specific needs, specifically Tana River, Kilifi County, Kajiado County Assembly, and eventually, I think those 3 counties, Mr. Speaker, county assemblies, that made specific requests to this House, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad that our colleagues have requested it. We have done it before. We began with, when we first came to this house, Mr. Speaker, there are counties that did not have even offices for their governors to meet, because previously there were either districts or very small administrative units. This house, in its wisdom, because we consider that all the 47 units are important to this county, allocated to more than 5 counties. I think Nyandarua, I can't remember the other counties, Tharaka-Nithi, about 4 counties, for them to put up their headquarters. And we passed it here without much of a huff. I never saw anybody say that, oh, why are you building a county assembly, a county headquarters for Tharaka-Nithi, yet I don't come from there. That is a kind of spirit and thoughtfulness that I expect of each of us, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, it's just a thought that I have shared, and I want Senator Roba and members of Budget and Finance Committee. This is now finally for the final time. I know I've said like 3 or 4 times, finally for the final time. What are we going to do on this issue of delayed disbursements? We have to think through it. We have to give proposals and even radical ideas to Treasury. Because if we expect Treasury to sort it on behalf of our county governments, perhaps they will never do it, Mr. Speaker. Is it not possible, Mr. Speaker, that as Senate, we gather the collective wisdom of all the colleagues that are here and demand of the national government that they issue a bond specifically for funding devolution, and whatever monies they attract on that particular bond, Mr. Speaker, be put in a consolidated account that we will have the national government continue to add on to that particular kitty as the years, as a month go by, Mr. Speaker, such that if you issue a bond of maybe 200 or 300 billion, Mr. Speaker, and I know it's not easy to attract such monies, but it is possible if we went out of our way. I have seen what World Bank has been able to do, the government of China, on a specific department like the roads department alone, Mr. Speaker. Raise $1 billion or $2 billion, Mr. Speaker. Start even with just 100 billion, Mr. Speaker. And have the national government know that this is what they would spend perhaps in about 3 to 4 months, because we are developing here 385. In between that period, because if you check over the long period, Mr. Speaker, there's always a delay of between 2 to 4 months or 3 months most of the time. That money will be sufficient such that each county knows that by 2nd or the 3rd of every month, they have received what is expected, what is their expected disbursement on that particular month. Then the national government, because we understand the economic situation that we find ourselves in, fills up into that particular bond. And the CRF account for devolution can be set up at a central bank. So such that after 3 months, that constant figure of 100 is never moved. Anytime it reduces, there is a top-up. Because it is impossible to imagine, Mr. Speaker, that we will develop our counties if governors have to wait for 3, 4, 5, or 6 months sometimes, Mr. Speaker, before they get their disbursement. And this problem is not likely to go away soon, Mr. Speaker, especially with the debt situation that we find ourselves in. So we have to think, and by resolution, I don't know by whatever means, demand of Treasury to come and appear before this House and give our proposals. We'll have ours, but it cannot continue to be in this. The present system that is being used, Mr. Speaker, is not tenable. This is not devolution as expected from us, as enshrined in our Constitution. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support and celebrate the good work of the members of this committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wambua.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to begin by saying that you don't get a second chance to make the first impression. And I think for Senator Roba and their team, this being their first CARA, they have done a good job. They have created a good impression. Speaker, to colleague senators, those that are debating CARA for the first time, it's important for them to know, and all of us to remember, that perhaps actually this is the only bill that originates here and ends here, and our word on it is final. This is the most important bill for the Senate, that we are now sharing revenue to our respective counties. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say two things before I go into this bill.
Order, Majority Leader and Senator Veronica. May the Senator be heard in silence, just like you are heard in silence.
You know, Mr. Speaker, you have defended me, so that's fine. So let me just continue. Mr. Speaker, I was saying the two things that Senator Cheriot has mentioned that I want to emphasize on is the role of the Senate on matters devolution. And I think if you don't get that right, then everything else that we do will be done in vain. Speaker, without mentioning names, because there is no need to mention names, I was a bit taken aback when we were debating the Equalization Fund. And that some senators said that they are not going to vote for it because their counties are not included. And I said, Mr. Speaker, if we take that route, then we, instead of defending devolution, we just kill it. The Speaker, if a substantial number of counties benefit from our work, then those counties don't have to be the counties that have sent us here. That is success of devolution, and we must all be proud of counties benefiting from our work. The Speaker, the other issue is what this committee has done on the matter of the sharing, the horizontal sharing of this revenue among the 47 counties, guided, of course, by the third basis. Mr. Speaker, there has been a debate, and that debate is coming up again, so we also have to be cautious. The one man, one vote, one shilling debate. The Speaker, I am happy that we ring-fenced the matter of land area index in the third basis. And that, Mr. Speaker, every conversation that we are going to have on the sharing of resources to our counties must always take into account one man, one vote, one shilling, 1 kilometer. Because, Mr. Speaker, there is something we call distance to service. The amount of money and time and personnel and vehicles that you spend to deliver drugs in the farthest end of Marsabit County must count for the monies that are allocated to that county. The Speaker, is very easy here in Nairobi to distribute drugs in hospitals, 50 hospitals, in an hour's time. There are other counties where it will take a whole month to distribute the same drugs to the same number of health facilities. And so the issue of distance to service as captured in land area index is an important one, so that as this debate begins to re-emerge, we don't lose out on that. The Speaker, coming back to the CARA for 2023, the Speaker, it is also ridiculous, and this I want the chairman and the vice chair to take note, that there are certain things that going forward we will have to deal with. One of those issues is the issue of pursuing almost absolute autonomy of the county assemblies from the executive. That, Mr. Speaker, we move beyond just an amendment on the second schedule, but endeavor to ensure that once the assemblies defend their budgets and their budgets are passed and approved, then they are fully in charge of their budgets without making any reference whatsoever to the executive. The Speaker, the matter that was brought here yesterday by Senator Cherargei from Nandi on salaries and allowances of members of the county assemblies. The Speaker, that debate is alive today. And I was actually speaking to the minority leader in the county assembly of Kitui, Honorable Nganga from Miambani Ward. And he was telling me, you know, Senator, actually we are not asking for more money for now. We're not even asking for more money. We already have that money in our budget. The only thing that we are asking is to find a way of reallocations of those monies and the revenues so that all the money that we have is not lumped in travel. And actually he was very honest with me and told me that's one of the reasons why every now and then your MCRs are either in Mombasa or they are in Naivasha or they are in Dubai or in Turkey, just try and make up for the deficits that they face. The Speaker, the Committee on Budget needs to take the lead in looking for what amendments we need to bring to the PFM Act to attain that autonomy in terms of the spending by county assemblies and make sure that there is proper flexibility on the way they use their budget without reference to the executives. Now, Speaker, the second thing is on the issue of committees. And the majority leader has mentioned it in passing. In fact, in my conversation with the Budget Committee Chair, he mentioned to me that there are some counties, assemblies, where they have in excess of 25 committees. And yet, the ideal is between 14 and 16 committees. That's a regulation that the Budget and Finance Committee must ensure that all county assemblies comply with. Mr. Speaker, there is the matter of the exchequer release to county assemblies, to county governments. Mr. Speaker, this is my second last point. You know, Mr. Speaker, there are some quick wins, and I expect that Senator Roba will take very keen interest in this one. All county governments and assemblies run accounts in commercial banks in their respective counties. Mr. Speaker, those banks are making money and profits using the money, the county monies that pass through those accounts. So, Speaker, the last time I checked, this country may be doing badly financially, but we are not necessarily insolvent. The Speaker, this committee, the Committee on Budget, can help county governments by making it a precondition for commercial banks where the revenues for counties pass through to ensure that on the 26th of every month, whether there is money in the salaries account of county assemblies and county governments or there is no money, the banks process payments for county staff. Because at the end of the day, that money will be wired through those banks anyway. So there is no reason, Mr. Speaker, why the employees of the county government of Kitui should go without pay for 3 months or 2 months, and yet the commercial banks that process these monies will eventually receive the money and process the payments. So we can have a standing order, and this can be a precondition for county governments to open accounts with commercial banks in their respective headquarters. The Speaker, on the issue of disbursements, and that's where I'm going to complete my submission. The Speaker, a conversation between a committee of the whole, led of course by the Budget Committee, and the Treasury, would greatly help. And this time round, let it not be someone's issue to the Treasury, let it be a conversation between us and Treasury, to ask the question, why is the Treasury unable to disburse funds to counties when the disbursements are due? And what is it that we can do as leaders in this country and the technocrats in the Treasury to ensure that counties get their monies when they are supposed to get their monies? Mr. Speaker, if we continue in the way that we have continued, that after we have passed Kara, we sit back, and as governors complain that they are not getting money, we in the Senate are also complaining. Mr. Speaker, somebody must provide a solution to this disbursement issue. And that solution can only be found between ourselves and the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, so that we also give other colleagues an opportunity to contribute to this bill, I support.
Senator Kisang.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also arise to support this bill. Honorable Speaker, I know when we passed the division of revenue, the allocation was raised from last year's 370 billion to 385.25 billion, Honorable Speaker, to the counties with an increase of about 15 billion, even though as senators we would have wished to raise it to 404 billion, but because of the conditions in the country, we reluctantly passed at 385. Honorable Speaker, out of these 385, 425 million was for libraries that were devolved during this financial year, next financial year. And Honorable Speaker, maybe as we go forward, I know when the committee went around the counties, those 14 counties that were not, didn't have libraries, wished that.
Senator Kisang, would you wish to be informed by Senator Faki before you proceed?
You know, I don't have an. He can inform me. He's my senior in this house.
Proceed.
Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kumfahamisha ndugu yangu Senator wa
Elgeyo Marakwet.
Elgeyo Marakwet. Si Kisang, yam. Kwamba pesa ambazo tulipitisha kwa Dora ni bilioni 385 milioni 425.
That's what I say.
Ambazo za library kulikuwa hakuna hapo. Za library, waziri wa fedha alipokuja katika kamati yetu alitaka kutuchanganya, akasema kwamba hiyo 425 au 425 zilikuwa ni za kutoa huduma za library ambazo zinatoka kwa serikali kuu, maktaba samahani, zinatoka serikali kuu zinakuja katika serikali za county. Lakini tukamwambia kwamba bilioni 335 425 ndizo pesa ambazo zinakuja kama shareable revenue, yani pesa ambazo zinatoka kwa serikali kuu zinakuja kwa serikali za county. Kwa hivyo akakubali, mwisho alikubali kwamba hakuna milioni 425 ambazo ni za maktaba ambazo watatafuta kwenye fedha zao nyingine, lakini katika zile za mgao wa kitaifa ni bilioni 385 milioni 425. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. At least that is positive information, because Senator Faki is a member of the committee. So at least we can push for the additional 425 million for the libraries for the 33 counties. But now that they're going to look for money for 425 for additional for the libraries that will be devolved, then we need also money for the other 13 counties, so that all our counties, especially the county headquarters, to have libraries. Honorable Speaker, what I also wanted to bring out in this debate, Honorable Speaker, is when the committee moved around to the counties during public participation, and you know, not all our counties are the same, Honorable Speaker. They are very unique. Counties, there are those counties that are very flat, there are those that are very hilly, others are very rocky. So it is important also for CRA to consider the terrain of the counties. If, as people say, 1 kilometer, 1/4, 1 shilling, we also need to look at the uniqueness of these particular counties. There are counties that have been marginalized. I know there was equalization fund on the equalization fund. There are counties that have suffered for long, especially in terms of insecurity. And when CRA are doing these policies on allocation, they don't consider. They talk about poverty and even population. And the population we're still using is the 2009 instead of the latest 2019 census, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also want to they need autonomy from the executive, because resources we've already agreed what they're supposed to get, but they have issues. The reason why they have many committees, you'll find a county that has about 40 MCAs and with 25 committees or 20 committees. So if it is a minimum of 6 members per committee, it means then a member belongs to about 5, 4, 6 committees. Even as here, Senate, most of us are in either 2 or 3 committees. But even to be effective in 3 committees is not easy because of the venues, the timings of the committees, because committees are supposed to sit on Tuesdays and Thursdays after lunch hour. If there are many, where will they sit? It is because of maybe allowances. That is why the MCAs put themselves into so many committees, appear technically there, and then you don't make meaningful contribution. So it is important that the committee does regulations as members are proposed, so that they become effective and they become also meaningful in terms of oversight, because they're the primary oversight at the county level. Honorable Speaker, most of our MCAs, I'm happy that there's about 4 billion here on reimbursement of the vehicles, the motor vehicle CRAN, Honorable Speaker, for the MCAs. Some counties have not even allocated the car grant to the MCAs. And the MCAs, most of them now are even going for public means. And those that have even agreed to reimburse the car grant, Honorable Speaker, KRA are demanding 30% of that car grant. So the counties need to budget so that our MCAs can work and work effectively. Honorable Speaker, I've also seen an issue on, they are spending a lot of money on insurance, spending a lot of money also on the legal, and I agree with the committee that they need to hire their own internal legal counsels, and they have lawyers in the panel so that they can hire on a need basis if the capacity internally cannot be able to assist to execute the cases in the court, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, as we go towards the review of the allocation of the formula, I think